Okay, I think we're actually recording. So, welcome everybody, or mostly everybody. Like I said, I hope everybody's doing well and is safe and is doing their best to sort of stay sane um, in these difficult times, and as well as sort of taking care of those you love as best you can. I've mentioned quite a bit, and I've said it a lot. I'm not going to say too much more about it, but just I'm well aware of the fact. I mean that I've tried to sort of keep you guys or let you guys know that I'm well aware of the fact that things are extra difficult now. Obviously, it's that much more difficult to stay focused. It's that much more difficult to stay motivated, to keep things organized, to even know what day it is. Um, it's Tuesday. Um, those things are all harder these days, not to mention just to get things done. I mean, I'm in the same boat in terms of being home all day with my son and my wife and all my other responsibilities and all that stuff. So it's all hard to keep track of. So I thank you for your continued sort of vigilance, sticking with it, and your hard work. Much respect on that. I mean, for me, it gives me a little bit of sanity. It gives me a little bit of something to focus in on, something to do in the midst of all this. So um, what I want to do with this session, and I want to try and I set this to stop at about 2 p.m. because I think it gives me like hour chunks. Um, so know that I'm going to say this at the top before we sort of run out of time. I don't think we will, but and I want to leave some time, hopefully at the end, for any kind of questions or concerns or anything like that. But you can always reach out to me if you want to have a kind of one-on-one or individual sort of office hour, virtual office hour on Zoom. I'm happy to do that as well. Um, so the goal of this workshop is primarily going to be to introduce, obviously, our new module, or do it in a way that isn't just on paper or on Canvas, um, and go through a little bit about what this new assignment is exactly all about. How do we go about? I mean, obviously, with the topic brainstorm assignment, it was all about getting you to start thinking about possible topics. And to be honest with you, I've only had a chance, obviously, to run through that relatively quickly, skim through it. But I was actually really impressed with a lot of the ideas out there. So as much as people were saying they were like, or the few students that I asked and said like, well, I'm going to make it open topic, they were kind of giving me a look like, yikes. Um, I mean, obviously you have the backup topic, excuse me, of the M3 icon. If having to figure out your own topic is just too much right now, then follow the M3 icon assignment sheet. And, it's basically asking you to choose a cultural icon and analyze and make an argument about what their impact is. That impact could be productive, it could be problematic. That's a backup process, if you were a backup topic, if you will, if you're not comfortable with deciding on your own topic. But from what I saw, almost everybody is choosing their own topic. I mean, even with the M3 icon, you're obviously going to need to choose your own focus. So it's just like our other papers in the sense that all I'm giving you is a general topic of an icon. You got to choose a focus. However, you also have the option to choose whatever topic you want. So I'm going to go through that a little bit. I'm also going to talk a little bit about this choice of medium. What does a video essay mean versus a written essay? A written essay is what we've been doing. So one thing, so we don't really need to go into details about this. It's a central claim driven. It's basically the papers that we've been writing are a written critical analysis. So, I mean, I know that seems obvious, but I just want to make sure that's clear. The other thing is that um, you're not allowed to, and I sound like a parent here, but what I don't want you to do is simply just write like the task isn't to write a creative writing story or a personal narrative or a literacy essay. That's not what I want. What we're looking for here is to sort of take the things that we've been practicing for this whole semester and that you also practiced in 105 and produce one more critical analysis. So in this case, if you're choosing the written essay option, which is you might want to because it's something you're familiar with, it's something you've been practicing, it's something that we've done for our first two essays, it's something that you did in your 105 essays. So I don't want to imply that if you go the written essay icon route, that you're your work's going to be considered, in comparison to, whatever. It's go the route that you feel is going to allow you to produce the most effective work in terms of, and by effective, I mean critical analysis and argument. So that's what the written essay option is. The video essay option is something different, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in just a second. So I'm going to try and share my screen here to sort of give you something, a little visual to hold on to as far as me going through introducing this module. If you do have questions, I think you guys probably know how to raise your hands in this thing. I believe if you go over to click on participants, of course, I'm just learning how to use this thing as well, pretty much. If you go on participants, I think you can, and then by your name, you can click like raise your hand, I think. I don't know. I think most people know how to do it, apparently, except me.
That's how you do it, yeah.
Yeah, I think okay. I guess I can't raise my hand because I'm the host, but yeah, if you go into participants, you should see an option to raise your hand. So go ahead and raise your hand. Feel free to interrupt me and stop me just like we're in regular class, or to ask me to slow down or go over something again. So let me share my screen here. Let's see. Okay. Just a second. All right. So I'm pretty sure everybody can see that. Let me put your guys just in gallery mode so I can see what's going on. Okay. Somebody just want to confirm for me that they can see the PowerPoint that's up there?
You can see it.
Okay, cool. Thank you, guys. So the M3 overview. So a couple things I want to set up. As with our previous modules, I'm going to sort of start off a little theoretically. So what exactly is this last writing assignment? Sorry, I think somebody just came in. They might be stuck in the waiting room. Yeah, okay, got him. Vinay is here. Okay, cool. So what exactly is this last writing assignment? So I'm going to talk about it a little bit theoretically where my idea is coming from, and to give you a little context about what exactly what we're up to here. So what exactly is this last writing assignment? One thing is to keep it in context, and I explained this a little bit already, that what this last assignment is doing is asking you to put your critical thinking and writing skills to work in service of something that you care about. So as I mentioned before, you've been practicing critical thinking and critical writing, or critical analysis and argument, for 2 semesters now, or almost the entirety of 2 semesters, in 105 and 106. You've been practicing central claims, you've been practicing subclaims and analysis and introductions and all that stuff. So my thought was like, that's one thing. I mean, these classes, 105 and 106, are focused around teaching you those methods, teaching you that genre of critical analysis and critical thinking and skills that apply to those things. Now the idea here is for you, and this is sort of like what happens when you go beyond 106. Yeah, you're probably not going to write a central claim driven essay, well, at least for our class anymore, but it might not be framed as a central claim driven essay or a subclaim driven analysis. But I guarantee you that in whatever field you're going into and in other classes, you're going to be asked to critically think and critically analyze things and develop arguments or analyses, or make arguments, if you're giving an oral presentation, or if you're in an interview, or you're proposing something to your company, or whatever it might be. So the idea here was to sort of take these methods that we have a little bit of a grasp of, central claims, subclaims, this whole critical analysis genre, and apply them to something that you care about. I mean, in many cases, you've had a little bit of an opportunity to do that in terms of choosing what subculture you wanted to write about, choosing what new or non-traditional narrative you want to write about. But here I really wanted to sort of give you an opportunity to sort of leave this wide open. And again, like I said, if that's not comfortable for you, you can of course go to the M3 icon and do it that way. So the genre we're still dealing with is critical analysis and argument. That's not any different. I'm not asking you to do something different than what we've done in terms of the structure, the purpose, right? So it needs to be a central claim and subclaim driven argumentative analysis, right? So the same way. These quotes, by the way, that I'm pulling here are quotes from the actual M3 overview. So just so you know, I'm sort of pulling out the nuts and bolts. That's where those things are coming from. The other thing that obviously is additional to this is that you have a choice, and we have the choice between not only a topic. Again, you can take that sort of wide open option and explore your topic, and I'm going to explore a topic that you're interested in. I'm going to talk about how to do that a little bit, and how to, I mean, you've obviously practiced that a little bit with the topic brainstorm discussion board, but I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can sort of go from having a general topic towards focusing that topic and seeing if it's going to work as an argumentative analysis. Or like I said, you can fall back on fall back isn't the right word. You can just choose the option to write about a specific icon. In that case, you'd want to look at that M3 icon worksheet that's in, or the assignment sheet that's right near the M3 overview in the modules page in Canvas. And then you have a choice of what medium you want to write in, right? So we covered the written essay, and then obviously you have this video essay option, okay? So, you know, we know what a written essay's primary modes are. Obviously the written word, the sentence, and the paragraph, central claims, subclaims, those things. The video essay obviously uses imagery, graphic design, and narration to develop its argumentative analysis. So let me say a little bit about the video essay. It's not expected, and obviously there's a video essay assignment sheet as well in Canvas that explains what's expected, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and if you have questions about it, raise your hand. A couple things that I want to emphasize about it. One is that it's not expected that you have super technical expertise. Like, you don't have to be able to use, you don't have to be able to code or be a brilliant sort of YouTube artist or whatever, a video artist or anything like that in order to create this. And you will not be graded, you will not be graded based upon how beautiful, if you will, or aesthetically pleasing your video is. It does need to be clear. You do want to, and I will sort of either give you a worksheet and or provide a Zoom workshop about how to create sort of clear slideshow, if you will, or visual presentation. We'll talk about that, or at least those of you who are interested in doing a video essay. But you don't need to have a sort of virtuosity with technical skill in relation to the video essay. So the reason I say that is because I do want to sort of promote, if it completely sort of scares you off or freaks you out, then don't do it. Let's stick to the written essay. But it's also an important skill to have, again, in terms of communication. So having the ability to create a sort of powerful presentation or a powerful video presentation, or I should say effective, in-depth critical analysis presentation, is something that's a good skill to have. So if you're interested in practicing that, developing that, that's something to think about. At its core, you can see the basic requirements in the video essay assignment, but really all that needs to be done is to take a PowerPoint slideshow, or put together, obviously, a PowerPoint slideshow. You obviously need to sort of come up with some sort of analysis and argument about a particular focus, come up with a central claim, come up with your subclaims. You might even want to sort of write out, I wouldn't say write a whole essay detailed and blah, 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 but, outline your video, and then put together a PowerPoint presentation that you can then narrate on top of. In some senses, I'm giving a video essay now, but that's something obviously a little bit different. So that's really all that's expected. You don't have to use PowerPoint. You can use Google Slides. You can use anything like that. If you do have skills, like how to create, use like iMovie, or use whatever you use, video editing software, and you want to go that route, you can. But I'm not saying that's going to give you sort of bonus points for having this wonderfully, beautifully produced video. No, it's more about the strength of the analysis and the argument in relation to how sort of the clarity of prose in this case will be based around the kind of composition and design principles of your video essay. You know, using imagery effectively, not overloading your slides with text, having good analytical points, blah, 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 those things like that. So that's really what the video essay is all about. I believe it's a minimum of 8 minutes, maximum of 10 minutes. You do need to have an over narration. So you will be talking over your PowerPoint presentation or your whatever, your Google Slides, and you need to record your voice doing so. So those are sort of those key differences. Any questions about the video essay before I sort of move on from that? Yeah, I've provided the examples there. Let me know if those links aren't working. Sometimes they can be a little tricky. You can just send me an email real quick and let me know if those links to the examples aren't working. One other quick thing I want to note about that is I've left student examples, which are the examples that you should sort of primarily pay attention to. And then I've left professional examples. The professional examples, it's not expected that you create something like that. Those are professional examples. These are people who, you know, some of them even sort of, I imagine, make their careers out of these YouTube, developing these videos. I just put them there for inspiration, so you can see what people are how people are using this genre or this medium in a professional capacity. The student examples are the ones you want to pay attention to in terms of those are things that students of previous hybrid classes have produced, so you can get a sense of how they did that. Sorry, one last thing with the video essay. You need to write a new analysis and argument. In other words, you can't take your subculture paper or your new narrative analysis and then turn that into a video essay. You need to have a new focus and a new analysis and a new argument. And that goes for this whole module. You know, I think somebody was in the discussion board was saying like, oh, well, I might write about, you know, I might write about my subculture again because I know a lot about it. Well, no, you need to write a whole new sort of analysis and argument here. Okay, so let me move on. I don't think I saw any hands. Forgive me if I'm skipping somebody, they can just speak up. And obviously you can ask me questions later about that video essay. So moving forward with the presentation here, how do I make this happen, right? So one thing I want to talk about is I think it's good to, when we're in a situation where we have to decide what our topic might be, you know, it's good to understand what is a critical analysis all about? What have we been doing? Why? I mean, we've talked a little bit about this, of course, but what is the purpose of it, right? And the purpose of it is an in-depth analysis, an argument versus just criticizing something. So in this context, the word critical carries a very different connotation than in everyday speech. Critical here does not simply mean pointing out a work's flaws or a text's flaws or arguing why it's objectionable or a narrative's or a subculture's flaws or arguing why it's a problem. It's not simply just to criticize. So that's important. I mean, I mentioned this at the start of class, right? Just because I use the word critical analysis doesn't mean that you're criticizing something. You know, it's a different kind of thing. What critical actually means in this scenario is that a critical argument analysis must do two important things. It must account for society within a historical context. This is actually coming from a critical theorist named Horkheimer. I mean, it comes from an article by Crossman. But the idea comes from critical theory. What does critical theory do? So a critical argument analysis must do two important things. It must account for society within a historical context, and it should seek to dig beneath the surface of social life to uncover the assumptions that keep human beings from an understanding of how the world works. Okay, that's a lot. That's a big mouthful there. That's based on, like I said, this philosopher, Max Horkheimer, who you don't need to know about him, but just to give some credit where credit's due. A couple key things that it points out here, and hopefully they'll be familiar to you. What a critical analysis does is that it's contextual, right? You've heard me say a thousand times, bring more context in your introduction. What time period are we talking about? What part of society? Context, context, context. So this quote here mentions historical context. The other thing it does is, so it's not only historical context, it's also the context of the social issue. So right, if I was writing a paper about, you know, like with my example with the central claim, I was writing a paper about the Riot Girl movement, that really sort of, took off in the 90s and I mean, the 90s, even into the early 2000s. I'm going to set up the context of gender and femininity in that time period, as well as today, probably, because I'm saying that the Riot Girls have meaning today as well. I'm going to set up that context. So you're always making an analysis and an argument of something within its context. Then the other thing is that it's in depth, right? So it digs beneath the surface of social life. So you probably heard me say a lot that when it came to our last papers that our RD2s, our subculture papers, it's not just a research report. You're not just telling us who the hippies were or who the Black Panthers were or are. You're telling us, you're making an argument, right? You're going more in depth beyond the sort of common knowledge of something. And at the same time, it challenges the assumptions. And I'm going to come back to these points. I know they're kind of lofty and they're a little sort of heavy-handed, but I'll see how they play out in terms of choosing a topic. And the third thing I mentioned is that it has some sort of social value, how the world works. In other words, it provides meaning. So what should we take from the Black Panthers? What should we take from the Little Mermaid, right? Obviously, that's a matter of argument, right? So I am saying, if I wrote that, if I wrote the article about the Little Mermaid, right, I'm making an argument about how I feel that this has some sort of social meaning or ramifications. Maybe social effect might be better than social value. But so those pieces you should recognize. Setting up context, challenging sort of, or being in depth with your analysis. That's why I say be more specific with your evidence and examples, be more specific with your subclaims, your elements, your analytical points, and your subclaims. And then also, what is the consequence and significance of this? Why does this matter in larger society? So I think it's important to sort of have those things in our brain as we start thinking about, what do I want to write about, right? So let's get a little bit more pragmatic here and talk specifically about, you're going to notice a lot of language that I'm throwing at. We've used the word focus a lot, right? What is the focus of your paper? So we've also talked about topic as well. So a simple example would be our last paper's topic was subcultures, okay? You're obviously not writing about subcultures in general, right? I mean, people don't even, I mean, some people have, but normally you don't write a book even on just a topic. Like you don't write a whole book about femininity. You could. The problem with that is it's going to be way too broad, right? You're going to talk about femininity and subcultures and femininity, for example. But obviously we need to find a focus within that sort of larger topic. So topic to focus. Topic is just to sort of put some basic definition of these things, because you're going to see this language a lot. I'm writing topic/focus because in a lot of our discussion boards, assignment sheets, because the idea is that you're starting with a general topic brainstorm, and then you need to sort of find a focus within that topic. So the topic is the general subject of an analysis, like subculture or gender, right? A focus is a more specific subject within a topic, right? So Riot Girl is obviously a much more specific focus than the general topic of subculture, or within the general topic of subculture, just as femininity is a more specific sort of focus within the larger topic of gender. These things are important to keep in mind, because as much as I'm not trying to imply that these papers are well, they're important to keep in mind because of the scope of our papers, right? We're writing 4 to 5 page papers, and I've kept this third essay, if you're doing the written essay, to the same length and number of sources as our previous essay. Sorry, somebody's coming in. So I kept the sort of length, if you're doing the written essay, the same. Normally it would be going up longer, it would be having more sources and stuff like that, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a break. But so we're writing the same length essay if you're doing the written essay. But being that the scope of these things, just like the sort of 8 to 10 minute video essay, we need to sort of be more focused. We don't have a whole lot of room to explore the general topic of subcultures or explore this whole idea of femininity and gender, right? We don't want to write a paper about hip hop in general. That is huge. That's massive, right? No, I want to talk about, a particular like drill rap in relation to masculinity, or drill rap in relation to violence and crime, or drill rap in relation to, you know, um, empowerment and black and brown identity, or whatever it might be. So that focus is key. It's really important to think about. So I just wanted to clarify those terms so the language doesn't throw you too much for a loop. Um, the focus then is a combination of a specific focus and issues. So I'm going to just pull two. I just pulled two things really quick in glancing over the topic brainstorm. And this is in no way a critique or anything. That the whole goal of that topic brainstorm was you just to sort of brainstorm. It isn't about finding a perfect or wonderful focus. It's about just getting some initial ideas down, following where your mind takes you, whether it's in relation to icons you might want to write about, or whether it's in relation to a whole other topic that you're interested in. So two things I'm going to pull out were like theater, and then other people were talking about therapy. They actually talked more specifically about these things, but I want to sort of show how once I have a particular topic in hand, I can start to narrow things down. I can narrow it down to more of a focus, right? And the way that I'm going to do that is with theater, a couple things that I can do, right? I could either narrow it down to a specific show, right? Like, okay, well, I want to write about, well, I'll give you an example. I'll give you two examples here in just a second. And or I want to connect to a specific social issue. So either way, writing a paper about the theater is just too broad, right? So I can narrow that down. So maybe I want to talk about how theater, and connect it to a more specific social issue, theater provides, a kind of education about ethics, right? And then that way, I have a little bit more of a narrow focus, right? Where I'm not writing about every single thing in relation to theater. I mean, there's a lot of arguments I could make, but I'm going to use a social issue to help focus this. I'm only going to be, I don't mean that again, but, I'm going to be writing probably 3, maybe 4 analysis paragraphs. And I'm going to want those things to be as focused as possible with evidence and examples. So I want to sort of narrow that down. So here I'm not narrowing down the actual focus of theater per se, but I'm narrowing it in terms of bringing in a sort of more clear social issue, right? Or maybe I want to talk about like theater and the education of children, or theater and racial identity, or and then I'm probably going to be thinking about, well, what plays or what shows connect to those issues do I want to relate to, which I could also even get more specific. And let's say I don't know a whole lot about theater, so forgive me, but I'm pretty sure Rent is a very popular Broadway show, and it's probably still going. But so maybe I want to write about how Rent critiques like the social issue of poverty, right, or the class structure in our society. I have no idea, by the way, if Rent does this. Forgive me. I know there's people who love theater in here and know 1,000 times more than I do. I'm just totally guessing here, but usually, anytime we're dealing with a kind of narrative, a lot of times, or a story, a lot of times many social issues can apply. But point being, I could be more specific with theater. I could talk about a particular show, and I could talk connected to a specific social issue. The advantage of this partially is to, like, in some sense, it's going to be a little easier for me to write, at least in my opinion, it's going to be easier for me to write the Rent and the critique of poverty paper. And the reason I say that is because since I'm so focused, there's more things that I can sort of sink my teeth into. Like, I can start thinking automatically, like if I've seen Rent, maybe I should use an example or a play I've seen, but forgive me. I can start thinking right now, well, what are the things that I can pull from that show? What are the elements, of course, that I can pull from that show that relate to class issues and poverty? And maybe there's a character, or maybe there's a scene, and maybe there's a moment of dialogue or a song or whatever. So that it just, for me, that's easier to do, right? If I'm faced with this sort of larger topic of theater, that's in ethics, it's narrower than just theater in general, the topic of theater, but it's still, I think, harder, right? I think it's harder to do that. It's kind of, I don't know, there's a little bit of an irony here, though. I feel like a lot of students feel like, oh, well, I need to go broader to get more out of my paper. Um, I feel like it's easier to go more specific. Like with Rent, I can really get into, I can write a whole paragraph about the opening scene of Rent, probably, right? You know, so because it's more substantive. There's stuff there's something that's there. Um, Theater is huge. I mean, theater is the history of all theater and all that. So it's big. So I think narrowing to a focus is really an important part of writing critical analyses and arguments, or writing period, that is something that doesn't get talked a lot about, I think, in writing classes. But so let's do it again with this notion of therapy. Again, narrow to a specific type of therapy and or connect to a specific issue. So I was thinking about like art-based therapy in children, and I can't remember who was writing. I think somebody was already writing about this. I think, and again, I skimmed through the discussion board, but so notice that I've focused a couple things there. I've focused in a specific type of therapy, art-based therapy or artistic-based therapy, like painting and music and things like that. And then also thinking more about the social issue of children in particular. Or another way I could go is like musical therapy and PTSD. So how musical therapy is helping people with PTSD, how it teaches us, or how I can develop an analysis and argument about the ways in which musical therapy is being used as a way to help people or treat people that have post-traumatic stress disorder. So those things help me to start focus things down. So once I've got that topic, the next step, and you guys have already, some of you or most of you have already made that kind of next step, but just in writing your discussion board posts, because this is something that you've been doing for our past 2 papers, we want to start moving towards narrowing it down in terms of an issue or issues, 1 or 2 maybe social issues, and maybe even narrowing the focus more specifically from therapy to art-based therapy or whatever it might be. Okay, so this is going to be the last sort of slide, and I'm going to sort of wrap up in terms of talking about how to develop a focus and how to find out. The last thing I want to talk about is, how do I know if my focus will make for an effective argument or analysis, right? I mean, a lot of times I get, you guys will come up to me, or, or a student will email me or whatever, and they'll say like, hey, Rick, I was thinking about writing about, I was thinking about writing about therapy for my 3rd essay. Do you think that's a good choice? And really the gist of this question is whether or not I think, number 1, is it focused enough? Number 2, the reason we focus things is because it'll make for a stronger argument and analysis, and analysis, I should say, right? So the question is basically, will this topic make for a good paper? So I was trying to come up with ways, well, how can I sort of give you I don't want to say formula, but a strategy for answering that question. So this is going to be like a lot, just a fair warning, but I sort of came up with a bunch of sort of questions that you can ask yourself to test for the viability of your focus. So as always, and you noticed in my examples from the topic Brainstorm, right? I think I had like 3 different ones there, like like how role-playing games and gaming could teach us about history, and I think I had another one about the film Repo Man, and then I can't even remember what the other one was, forgive me. But it's good often to have like a couple different things in mind, because then when I test them, like, is this going to work? Some of them might not work. So I'm going to put up about 6 different questions you can ask yourself. So I also want to bring back those key terms that we talked about. What's the purpose of a critical analysis, right? It should be contextual, meaning it should be talking about a specific, part of our society in a specific place and time. It should allow for your focus, should allow for an in-depth analysis. It should also perhaps challenge assumptions, meaning it should do more than just tell your reader what they already know, right? So, and then it should have some sense of social value. You should be able to make some sort of connection as to why this has some sort of social effect or meaning, significance, right? So this is the way I'm going to do it, and I'll post this PowerPoint. I'll post this whole recording and the PowerPoint itself to Canvas, so you can have these questions. But I thought what you could do to test the viability of your focus once you develop that focus is sort of ask yourself these questions. Will my argument or analysis, okay, a lot. Now, I'm not saying you need to say yes to every single one of these questions. In fact, I would say that you need to probably just to say yes to 2 of these things. And so let me go through these. I'm going to go through them not super fast, but relatively quick. But will my argument and analysis provide for an in-depth analysis of at least 3 elements of my focus? So I think that question you should always answer yes to. And I mean, I think so. And the reason I say that is because, like, let's say I'm thinking about writing about that paper about the film. Let's say I'm writing the paper about theater and ethics education. And I'm thinking, like, well, what elements of the theater can I write? And I don't know. I can't, in some senses, it's too broad, maybe. I can't even think about it, right? I can't even think about, like, what, as opposed to, like, when I think about Rent, and I've seen Rent, I'm like, oh yeah, there's at least 3 things I could talk about. Excuse me, right? So in that sense, that allows me to sort of test initially my focus. Like, oh yeah, I could talk about this, I could talk about this. Hopefully I can come up with at least 2 just off the top of my head, and then doing more research or doing more analysis, or watching Rent again or whatever, thinking back on it, I'll come up at least 3. So that's one that for sure you want to have. That makes sure that there's something to say, there's something to analyze and look at. Will my argument analysis provide for a different understanding of the focus? In other words, this is particularly the case if it's something that's been written a lot about, right? So, right, there's a lot of common knowledge about, like, a subculture about the hippies, let's say, right? But maybe there isn't a whole lot of common knowledge about how the hippies changed our understanding of drugs or something, or sexuality. So will it provide a new understanding of the focus? Or maybe there's not, a lot of people have written about Rent in terms of maybe the issue of class. So maybe instead I'm going to take approach towards talking about race. So that kind of goes to the third one, where will my analysis provide a different or new understanding of the social issue, right? So how does Rent teach us something different about race? Or how does Rent teach us something different about class in our society? You're going to see that some of these are going to overlap quite a bit. Will my argument analysis provide further understanding of your focus or social issue beyond what's already there, right? And what I mean by what's already there is, like, in some sense, the Little Mermaid argument is an argument that's been made a bunch of times. So if I don't really have anything to sort of add to that, like, I'm not going to I'm just going to rehash an argument that's already been made. It's probably not going to be the strongest argument or analysis in the world. Not that I couldn't write about the Little Mermaid and gender and femininity, but I need to make sure that I'm sort of taking a different, at least slightly distinct spin on it, right? So that's where research becomes really important. You're going to see for this discussion board post that we have that's due by the end of Friday night, you're going to want to do some initial research, see what's already been said out there. Or it could be writing something, that nobody's really written about. Like, I don't think drill rap has necessarily been written about a lot. Or let's say I'm writing about, the coronavirus is not something that a whole lot of people, actually, there's a lot of people writing about it now. But, in some cases I'm writing on a focus that hasn't been written a lot about. And in that case, I'm already automatically writing about something that's already there. Does my argument of analysis provide a challenge to common assumptions about your focus and your social issue, right? So, this brings me to an example of, like, some people were writing about, for this last paper, were writing about doomsday preppers, right? And a lot of people feel like doomsday preppers, I think a common assumption of doomsday preppers is they're a little paranoid, they're a little, crazy. I'm talking about sort of common stereotypes or common assumptions. I'm not saying these things are true. I'm just saying that, the common conception of doomsday preppers is that they're a little out there, right? Stockpiling weapons, stockpiling all this food, whatever it might be, having a bomb shelter and stuff like that, or whatever it might be, right? Studying up on zombies, or, So that's the kind of common assumption or stereotype, if you will. but I'm going to do an analysis that says, okay, fine, maybe a lot of us feel this way, but this doesn't mean, and maybe even some of it's true, but this doesn't mean there isn't something really valuable to learn from the doomsday prepper subculture, right? So I'm moving beyond those kind of common assumptions. Does your argument of analysis provide an uncommon connection between your focus and a social issue, right? So, you know, um, let's say I'm writing about the Black Panthers, okay? Obviously, a lot has been written about, and it's not that you couldn't still make a good argument this way, but a lot has been written about the Black Panthers. I'm using subculture examples because that's the paper we just got done with. I don't mean to imply that you need to write about subcultures again. I would think you would not want to do that. And you don't want to just rewrite the paper you've already written. I already mentioned that. But, the Black Panthers have mostly been written about in terms of race, racial empowerment, racial identity. Let's say I want to say, obviously that's there. I want to talk about the Black Panthers in terms of how they created a new idea of education. So that's something I could do. Does your argument analysis provide a new or distinct understanding of ourselves in relation to a social issue? Does it provide a new or distinct understanding of how our society works in relation to a social issue? Right. So, I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about how, I mean, Katie, for some reason, your paper's jumping into my head. Katie wrote about for our non-traditional narrative. I can't remember the name of the band, but she wrote about an artist who is and I think Megan was thinking about writing about like Demi Lovato and how she is using her artwork to teach us about mental health. So, in some ways, I'm using the focus of Demi Lovato, or I'm using, Katie, whatever the band was. You don't need to remind me, but I'm using the example of Demi Lovato to show how we learn a lot about how mental health works and is understood and is treated in our society. And in some cases, that usually means that we're learning more than what we already know about mental health. We're learning more than what we know on the surface about mental health. Finally, I'm watching my time here. Will your argument analysis provide an understanding about why a certain social problem exists? Right. So maybe the example of Demi Lovato shows or teaches us, has that kind of social significance, showing us that we don't seem to care enough about mental health. We don't seem to care enough about, we don't seem to have the right approach or understanding of how to treat mental health issues. We often have these stereotypes or assumptions that mental health is something that only happens to other people and not sort of mainstream people or regular people, whatever that might mean, right? So a lot of these kind of overlap. Again, I'm not saying that you need to answer all of these, but you should check at least two of these things off. And by checking off at least two of these things, what I mean is that the first one should be a given, not a given. It should be something that for sure you feel you can do. In other words, is there enough kind of like substance there for me to develop at least three different subclaims? Are there three elements I can look at and produce enough analysis out of? Just one last example, and then I'll shut up. An example of this would be, this was a couple semesters ago. This happens all the time. It's not like it's that infrequent. But I had a student come up to me, and they were writing the non-traditional narrative, and they wanted to write about this children's song, which I am very familiar with now that I have a toddler son. It's a very bizarre song, as most children's songs are, but it's like mommy finger, daddy finger, daddy finger. It's this song. You've probably heard it. If you haven't, and you don't have, if you ever around kids one day, you'll probably hear it. But anyways, it's this song. It's a very simple song. And she was very interested in writing this paper on this song. And when we've really started thinking about it, she realized, like, there's not much there. There's not much to pull out. So we sort of realized, like, I don't think it's going to work for like a 4-page paper. Maybe a quick, like, page-long analysis, sure, in terms of what kids are learning. But we were really stretching, and she was really stretching to try and, like, pull stuff out of that song in terms of making a really in-depth analysis of it. So that's an instance where it's kind of too small for this, even for the scope of some of these shorter papers. So that's something that you want to make sure that's there. It's like, okay, I have 3 different ideas here that for sure are 3 elements that I know that I could probably develop in relation to other arguments. So that's why I say check at least 2. That would be the first. And then hopefully your argument of analysis will fulfill one of these other things. The last thing I say, I promise, is part of the discussion board that's due on Friday, which I believe is called, I can't remember the title of it. Something in plan or prompt. Um, sorry. I think it's focus, selection, and prompt. Anyways, there's a discussion board that's due by the end of Friday night. And the goal of that discussion board is to get you guys to choose a focus and choose a medium, video essay or written analysis. And so you can be off and running. Because before we know it, next week, we're going to have the invention posts and replies. And then the next week after that is going to be our workshop draft due. I mean, it's going to move quick. So we want to make sure by the end of this week, you have a sense of what your focus is going to be, and you have a sense of what medium you're going to want to go into. As far as if, when it comes to the video essay, we're still going to be doing like workshop draft things. I don't mean it won't be a written workshop draft. It might be an outline of what your video is going to be, maybe even some images that you're going to include. So that will all get worked out later. But I want to know in that post on Friday, that discussion board, you want to give us and me a clear sense of what is the focus going to be of your paper, what do you think your argument's going to be, and what medium are you going to use to develop that argument analysis. So what part of that post asks you to sort of write your own prompt, which says like, how does the Riot Girl movement, or how does, I think I gave you some examples, but like, how does the film Repo Man teach us about class discrimination and career opportunity in our society, right? Or something like that. You're going to need to write the question. We did something similar with the approach statements that you did in your research case studies. Here, I'm asking you to write a question that will serve as kind of like your essay prompt, if you will. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing the screen here. Like I said, I will post this PowerPoint and this recording to Canvas so you can have this information in a written down form or in a recorded form. So let me just stop share here. Okay, so I guess we have about 8 minutes. I don't know if this thing just shuts off automatically at 2, so we'll see. But any questions, even if they're basic questions, like want me to go over something again, explain something again, or questions about your individual topic ideas or anything like that. The sound of silence. Okay. All right, so my recommendation from here is to sort of take, sort of run your own test. I mean, develop your topics down into a focus, run your own kind of viability tests like I showed, and then sort of get a sense of, that'll help. All those things will not only help you develop a clearer approach for your actual essay, but it'll also help you do that sort of discussion board post, and which reminds me, I want to look up the name while I'm at it, so I'm not. Snapshot plan is what it's called. So that post is due by Friday at the end of the night. And the replies are due by the end of Monday night. And then we have invention posts on Tuesday from Katie, Jasmine, Dylan, and Bryce. And then we'll reply to those invention posts on Wednesday, the 22nd. Then we have more invention posts from Michaela, Sarah, and Rachel on Thursday. And then we'll reply to those posts next Friday. This is next week. And as far as those people who are doing invention posts, I will be reaching out to you with an email. Just so you know, you're doing those invention posts on whatever it is you're going to be writing about for this paper. So, you know, the focus and, you know, that's the topic, if you will, or the subject matter of your invention post should be whatever it is you're writing about for this paper. All right, guys, it was good to see you, sort of. Any last second questions before we sign off? I don't, I think what'll probably happen is next, let me look at the schedule. I think next Tuesday, if people, you know, again, if people think it's useful and find it to be useful, I think it's good to sort of touch base. Let me see. We'll figure it. We'll definitely have another Zoom workshop before our workshop draft is due, and the workshop draft of this paper is due on the 28th of April. We'll definitely have another Zoom workshop. We won't have another one this week, and I'll let you know if we have one next week. The other thing is, if you do want to have a sort of one-on-one conversation via Zoom, any questions you have, feel free to reach out to me and we can do that. In the meantime, I hope you guys are all well. I know this is, I mean, it's living in a surreal time, but obviously it's all too real, and it's making things difficult for everybody. So stick to it, stay up, stay strong, and I'll see you next time around. All right.
Thank you.
All right, no problem. See you guys. Bye
Have a
bye.
nice day.
Bye.